The chandeliers of the Manhattan Grand Hotel glimmered like 1,000 frozen stars, casting their arrogant light across the ballroom. Tonight was supposed to be a celebration of wealth, power, and prestige. But hidden beneath the glitter and gold was a storm that no one could stop. At the center of the room stood Andrew Weston, Wall Street's golden boy. He laughed too loudly, his tuxedo sharp enough to slice through the whispers surrounding him. But what truly captured everyone's attention wasn't Andrew himself. It was the woman clinging to his arm. Yila Summers, a 23-year-old social media star with fire-red hair and a dress so revealing that it dared the world to look away. The two of them looked like a scene from a tabloid. Powerful billionaire with his young mistress, flaunting a romance in front of Manhattan's elite. Glasses clinked, cameras flashed, but behind the smiles there was poison. Guests exchanged knowing glances. Some smirked, some gasped, a few shook their heads. But no one dared confront him. After all, Andrew Weston wasn't just rich, he was untouchable, or so he thought. Because while Andrew was parading his mistress under the chandeliers, his wife Emma was standing at the edge of the ballroom, her hand resting protectively over her swollen belly. Emma Weston, 6 months pregnant, wore a simple ivory dress that didn't glitter under the lights. She didn't need sequins to make a statement. Her eyes, deep with hurt but burning with resolve, were louder than any diamond necklace. She stood still, watching as her husband laughed with another woman, as if his vows were dust. It wasn't the first time Andrew had betrayed her. The late-night calls, the secret trips, the whispers of perfume on his suit. She had known, she had endured, she had prayed for change. But tonight was different. Tonight, he crossed a line no woman should ever be forced to accept. Hila leaned in close, whispering something in Andrew's ear, her laugh echoing like glass shattering in Emma's chest. And then it happened. Andrew kissed Hila in full view of investors, tycoons, and flashing cameras. The ballroom froze. Forks clinked against plates. Murmurs rose like waves crashing against marble walls. A pregnant wife left behind, a mistress on display, and a husband too arrogant to care. Emma's hand trembled on her clutch, but her face didn't crumble. Inside, her heart cracked into 1,000 pieces, but she held her chin high. Every humiliation she had endured, every insult, every lonely night, all of it sharpened into one moment of clarity. She would not break. Slowly, deliberately, Emma turned away from the ballroom. Her heels clicked against the marble, echoing like a countdown. A few guests watched her go, pity flickering in their eyes. Others pretended not to notice, too afraid of Andrew's power to intervene. But what none of them knew was that Emma had already made her decision. Back at their penthouse earlier that evening, she had placed a set of papers on Andrew's desk. Divorce papers, signed, sealed, irreversible. She had been too afraid for weeks, terrified of raising a child alone. But betrayal had a way of turning fear into fire. Now, as she walked out of the ballroom, she carried more than heartbreak. She carried freedom. Outside, the city air was crisp, heavy with the scent of rain. Emma hailed a car, her hand shaking as she held her belly. Every beat of her heart screamed that this was madness. But madness was better than chains. The car pulled away from the glowing hotel. Behind her, Andrew was still basking in the spotlight, blind to the storm about to crush him. He had no idea that his wife was done begging for scraps of love. No idea that tonight wasn't his victory. It was the beginning of his downfall. Emma's phone buzzed in her purse. She pulled it out, expecting another cruel headline, another reminder of her husband's betrayal. But the message on the screen froze her breath. "Your jet is ready. Please proceed to the private terminal. Everything you need is waiting." Emma blinked. Jet? She hadn't arranged for anything. She had no plan beyond walking out. But the message was clear. Someone powerful, knew what she was going through. And they weren't just offering sympathy. They were offering escape. Her heart pounded as the car turned toward the private airport. She didn't ask questions. She didn't dare hope. But deep inside, a spark lit up. Could it be Ethan Blackwell, the billionaire CEO Andrew had once mocked at a boardroom table? Ethan, the man with eyes that always lingered a moment longer on her, as if he saw the pain no one else noticed? Emma gripped her belly tighter, whispering to the child inside, "We're leaving, sweetheart. We're leaving tonight." And as the lights of Manhattan faded into the distance, Emma Weston, the woman everyone thought too weak, too dependent, too broken, was about to step into a jet that would carry her away from betrayal, away from humiliation, and into a future no one could have predicted. Because this wasn't the end of her story. It was only the beginning. And when Andrew Weston walked back into his penthouse after his night with his mistress, he would find only two things waiting for him: divorce papers on his desk and an empty home. Emma Weston had once believed in fairy tales. She believed in the kind of love that could weather storms, the kind of marriage where two people built a world together hand in hand. For a time, she thought she had found it. But fairy tales are fragile things, and reality has a way of shattering even the most carefully guarded dreams. Emma was 29, raised not in the marble halls of wealth, but in the quiet hum of a working-class neighborhood in Pennsylvania. Her father was a schoolteacher who loved literature, and her mother worked as a nurse with hands always busy, always tired but full of care. From them, Emma learned compassion, patience, and the strength to stand tall even when the world felt heavy. She grew up reading books in the corner of a small public library, dreaming of one day working in the arts. She carried those dreams with her to college, where she studied art history and later earned a master's degree. It wasn't glamorous, but it was hers. She worked part-time at a museum, guiding school children through halls of paintings, teaching them to see not just color, but emotion, not just lines, but meaning. Those were her happiest days, simple, full of quiet purpose. And then she met Andrew Weston. He was magnetic, the kind of man who drew attention without asking for it. At a charity gala she attended with a friend, Andrew walked up to her with a confidence that both startled and intrigued her. His suit was expensive, his smile charming, and when he spoke, it was as though he had the whole world figured out. Emma, with her gentle presence and shy laugh, seemed invisible compared to the glamorous women around him. But Andrew noticed her, or at least, he made her believe he did. Their whirlwind romance unfolded like pages in the very novels Emma loved. Flowers at her doorstep, dinners under candlelight, promises whispered late at night. When Andrew proposed after only 8 months, Emma thought it was destiny. Against her parents' quiet warnings that it all seemed too fast, she said yes. She wanted to believe that a man so powerful could truly love her for who she was. For a while, life was golden. They lived in a penthouse overlooking Central Park, attended galas, and smiled for photographers. Andrew introduced her to the world as his queen, and Emma believed her happily ever after had finally arrived. But cracks formed quickly. Andrew's charm began to fade behind closed doors. He complained that Emma was too ordinary, that she didn't fit into the sharp-edged world he was building. She was urged to dress flashier, to speak less, to smile more when standing beside him at events. Every time Emma tried to voice her own thoughts, Andrew would brush them aside. And then came the loneliness. Nights when Andrew didn't come home, excuses about late meetings or business trips. Emma wanted to believe him. She clung to the idea that if she loved him enough, he would change. But the distance grew wider with each passing month. When Emma discovered she was pregnant, she thought maybe everything would finally shift. She imagined Andrew softening, perhaps remembering the man who once looked at her as though she were the only person in the room. For a brief moment, he did. He touched her belly with something that looked like wonder. He promised he would be there. He swore he would protect her and the baby. But promises can be hollow, and Andrew's were. As her pregnancy progressed, Emma found herself alone more often than not. The nursery she had hoped to design with her husband was left untouched. Andrew spent his nights at fundraisers and networking dinners that seemed to multiply with suspicious convenience. His phone was always locked. His smile never reached her anymore. Emma bore the loneliness quietly. She hid her tears, telling herself she had to stay strong for the child growing inside her. She played the role of the perfect wife in public, even as whispers reached her ears. Whispers of Andrew's wandering eyes, of his mistress Ela, of stolen nights in hotel rooms that weren't his own. Still, Emma endured. Because love makes fools of us all, and hope is a stubborn flame that refuses to die. She remembered the boyish grin that had once made her heart race. She remembered the promises of forever. She thought, if she just waited, if she just endured a little longer, he would return to her. But the night she saw him kiss Ela in front of hundreds of people, the truth crashed down like a thunderclap. There was no saving what they had. There was no fairy tale left. Inside, Emma broke. But on the outside, she stood tall. And in that strength, she found something she hadn't felt in years: resolve. For the first time in her life, Emma wasn't thinking about saving her marriage. She was thinking about saving herself. She was thinking about the baby who deserved more than a father who mocked love and a mother too afraid to fight for her dignity. The woman who once believed in fairy tales was gone. In her place stood someone new, someone ready to rewrite her story. And that story began with a signature on a stack of divorce papers. Emma slid the pen across the page in their penthouse, her hand steady despite the storm inside her. When the ink dried, she placed the documents neatly on Andrew's desk. It was over. Not tomorrow, not someday. Tonight. As she closed the folder, a single tear rolled down her cheek. She wasn't crying for him anymore. She was crying for the years she had wasted believing in a man who never truly saw her. She whispered to herself, to her unborn child, to the city outside her window, "We deserve better." And deep down, Emma knew she was right. She had no idea what waited for her. No plan, no map. But she had something far more powerful than hope. She had resolve. And as the rain began to fall against the glass windows of the penthouse, Emma Weston, pregnant, abandoned, but no longer afraid, was about to make a choice that would shock not only her husband, but the entire world. The city never truly sleeps, and neither did the Weston's world. From the outside, their life was painted in gold. Penthouses, limousines, and glittering soirees that most people could only glimpse on the pages of glossy magazines. To the strangers who saw them smile at galas or step out of black cars onto red carpets, Andrew and Emma looked like the perfect couple. Wealth, beauty, success, wrapped in an elegant bow. But behind the curtain of glamour lay something cold, hollow, and unbearably lonely. Their penthouse in Midtown Manhattan was a palace in the sky. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered sweeping views of the East River, the Empire State Building glittering at night like a jeweled crown. Imported Italian marble lined the floors, every surface polished until it reflected the light of crystal chandeliers. The furniture was custom-made, sleek and expensive, yet so impersonal it felt more like a showroom than a home. Every piece was chosen by Andrew or his designers, not Emma. She had wanted warm colors, cozy corners, spaces that felt like love. What she got instead were cold lines, empty rooms, and silence. Silence. That was the loudest thing in their penthouse. Andrew was rarely home, and when he was, he filled the space with phone calls, arguments, or the glow of another screen. Emma often found herself standing alone by the nursery door, one hand on her belly, whispering to the baby inside about a future she prayed would be brighter than the present. The contrast between her world and Andrew's became painfully clear during the galas he insisted they attend. These weren't mere parties. They were battles, fields where power was currency and reputation was armor. Every chandelier dripped with diamonds. Every table bloomed with flowers that cost more than a month's rent in the neighborhoods Emma once knew. Champagne flowed endlessly, and conversations were sharp, veiled daggers wrapped in polite laughter. Emma, in her understated dresses, always felt like a shadow among the women who wore gowns straight from Paris runways, their wrists heavy with jewels, their lips curling with the kind of confidence born from privilege. She moved through those glittering halls with quiet grace, smiling when spoken to, speaking only when necessary. Andrew expected her to play the role of the perfect accessory, seen, admired, but never truly heard. It was at these events that Emma began to notice the shift. Andrew, once attentive, no longer walked beside her. Instead, he drifted toward younger women, ambitious socialites, and investors eager to laugh at his every joke. His arm would slip from hers as easily as his vows had slipped from his heart. And though the cameras still caught them together, the connection was long gone. Yet, the world outside believed the illusion. Headlines called them New York's golden couple. Photographers captured their smiles, never the cracks in between. And Emma, though her heart was breaking, kept her silence. For her child, for her dignity. For the shred of hope that maybe, just maybe, things could change. But the truth was written in the very walls of the world Andrew had built. The penthouse was a museum of ambition. The galas were theaters of betrayal. And Emma was an actress trapped in a role she never auditioned for. One memory lingered in her mind like a wound. It was a gala at the Metropolitan Museum, a night drenched in opulence. Emma had chosen a simple navy gown, elegant but modest. She remembered feeling the baby kick for the first time that evening, a tiny flutter of life reminding her that she wasn't truly alone. She had smiled to herself, placing a gentle hand on her stomach. Andrew hadn't noticed. He was too busy whispering in Hila's ear near the champagne fountain, his hand grazing the small of her back in a gesture that once belonged only to Emma. People saw. They whispered. Some pitied Emma, others delighted in the scandal. She had stood there, back straight, eyes forward, swallowing the lump in her throat until it felt like she would choke. After the event, as their car drove home through the sparkling city, Emma had turned to Andrew, her voice trembling but firm. "Andrew, please. This isn't right. We're having a baby. I need you with me." He had laughed, cold and dismissive. "Don't be dramatic, Emma. This is how the world works. You'll get used to it." Those words echoed in her head long after. You'll get used to it. As though betrayal were a routine, as though humiliation were a dress she should learn to wear. But she couldn't. She wouldn't. And so, as the weeks passed, Emma began to see the truth more clearly than ever before. The world Andrew had built was never hers. She was a guest in his empire, tolerated but never cherished. Her role was decorative, her voice silenced, her love taken for granted. Yet the very same glittering world that had once trapped her would soon become the stage for her liberation. Because behind the closed doors of their penthouse, Emma had already drawn the line. The divorce papers were more than ink on paper. They were her declaration of freedom. She no longer cared about appearances. She no longer feared whispers. She was done playing the perfect wife in a world that was never perfect at all. The setting that had once humiliated her, the ballrooms, the penthouse, the endless spotlight, would soon witness something far more shocking than a scandal. It would witness a woman rising from the ashes, no longer a silent accessory, but a force powerful enough to change everything. And as Emma stood in the marble hallway of the penthouse that night, staring at the city lights below, she knew one thing for certain: the glamorous world Andrew prized above all else was about to become the very stage of his downfall. Every story has a villain, but villains rarely see themselves that way. In Andrew Weston's mind, he was not a betrayer, not a liar, not a man tearing his family apart. No, Andrew saw himself as a king, entitled to take whatever he wanted because he had built an empire with his own two hands. But to Emma, to those who truly watched, Andrew wasn't a king at all. He was a man consumed by arrogance, by hunger, by the shallow applause of strangers. Andrew hadn't always been rich. He was raised in Queens by a father who worked construction and a mother who managed a diner. Life was modest, money scarce, but Andrew's ambition burned hotter than the lights of Times Square. He clawed his way through college with scholarships and sheer determination, and by his late 20s, he had already made a name on Wall Street. His rise was meteoric, fueled by charisma, charm, and a cutthroat instinct that made investors trust him and fear him. By the time he met Emma, Andrew had enough wealth to buy anything, but not enough to quench the thirst inside him. At first, Emma's kindness had been a novelty. She was different from the women in his circles, gentle, sincere, untainted by greed. She adored him without question, and for a while, Andrew enjoyed being her hero. But arrogance is a disease, and Andrew was already infected. He grew restless. Emma's simplicity, once refreshing, now felt dull to him. She wanted love, home, a family. He wanted power, excitement, conquest. He started craving the rush of being desired by others, the thrill of stepping into a room and knowing every woman wondered what it would be like to be on his arm. And then came Hila Summers. At 23, Hila was everything Emma was not, or so Andrew believed. She was loud where Emma was soft. She was bold where Emma was modest. She knew how to work a camera, how to pose so every angle screamed perfection. She was a rising social media influencer, a girl who turned her life into spectacle, her beauty into currency. They met at a networking event Andrew attended alone. Hila had maneuvered her way into the party, though she had no real reason to be there. She wasn't an investor or a partner. She was simply beautiful, and that was enough. Andrew noticed her instantly. The red hair, the daring dress, the laugh that rang through the air like a bell no one could ignore. To Andrew, Yila was temptation wrapped in sequins. To Yila, Andrew was opportunity in a tuxedo. Their chemistry was instant, their motives clear. She wanted the spotlight, he wanted the thrill. Within weeks, rumors spread through Andrew's circle. Whispers of late-night rendezvous, of hotel suites charged under other names, of a woman half his wife's age clinging to him at rooftop bars. Emma heard the whispers. She chose silence. Andrew, on the other hand, relished them. He liked the power of flaunting what everyone suspected but no one dared confront. He began bringing Yila closer to his business world, introducing her at events as a consultant, seating her at tables meant for investors. The audacity only fueled his pride. Behind closed doors, Andrew justified everything. "I deserve this," he would mutter to himself, pacing in the penthouse office. "I've worked too hard, sacrificed too much. Emma will always be there, but I need more." More, that was his poison. More money, more attention, more women. And Yila gave him exactly that. She stroked his ego, laughed at his jokes, posed beside him for secret selfies that she would leak strategically to her followers. With every stolen moment, Andrew drifted further from the man Emma had married. To the world, he projected strength. But in truth, Andrew was weak. Weak to temptation, weak to vanity, weak to the need for validation. He mistook cruelty for power, betrayal for freedom. He paraded Yila around as though humiliating his pregnant wife made him untouchable. And Yila? She played her role flawlessly. She was not in love with Andrew. Love was never her goal. She was hungry for status, for access, for the thrill of watching a powerful man bend the world for her. She mocked Emma in whispers at parties, giggled about her old-fashioned dresses, and sneered that Andrew was wasted on a boring housewife. To Yila, Emma was invisible, an obstacle she had already conquered simply by existing on Andrew's arm. Together, they were poison disguised as glamour. Andrew, the husband who betrayed without shame. Yila, the mistress who thrived on cruelty. They strutted into ballrooms as if the world belonged to them, oblivious to the storm brewing just beyond the marble doors. But villains never see the ending coming. Andrew thought his empire was untouchable, his wife too weak to fight back. Yila thought she was on the fast track to becoming Mrs. Weston. Neither of them realized that the woman they mocked, the woman they dismissed, was gathering a strength more powerful than their arrogance. And soon, the ballrooms that had once echoed with Andrew's laughter would bear witness to his disgrace. Because while Andrew kissed Yila under the chandeliers, his pregnant wife was already preparing a reckoning that neither of them could escape. The night of betrayal was not hidden in shadows. It was not whispered in secret. It unfolded under chandeliers, in front of cameras, in a ballroom filled with the city's elite. If humiliation could be measured, Emma Weston had just endured a hurricane. The gala was the annual Bright Horizons charity ball, one of the most exclusive events in Manhattan. Tickets were worth more than some people's yearly salary, but for Andrew Weston, it was merely another stage to display his power. He arrived in a black limousine, stepping out with Yila Summers clinging to his arm. Photographers swarmed instantly. "Mr. Weston! Over here! Who's the lady, Andrew? Smile for us, give us a headline." And he did. He tilted his head toward Yila, his lips brushing her cheek as the flashes burst like fireworks. The image was captured, immortalized, and within hours it would circle social media. The billionaire with his mistress, laughing as though the world belonged to him. But what Andrew didn't expect was Emma. She hadn't planned to attend. She hadn't wanted another night of fake smiles and whispered pity. But something in her heart told her to go. Not for Andrew, not for appearances, but for herself. She chose a gown of soft ivory silk, simple but timeless, the kind of dress that didn't scream for attention, yet commanded it by its quiet dignity. Her hair swept back, her eyes steady, Emma arrived at the gala alone. When she entered, the room shifted. Conversations faltered, glasses froze mid-air. She was radiant not in jewels, but in resolve. And though her belly showed her pregnancy clearly, it was not a symbol of vulnerability tonight. It was a symbol of strength. Andrew's smirk faltered the moment he saw her. For the briefest second, his mask cracked. He hadn't expected her to come. He hadn't expected her to walk into his kingdom of deceit. But Yila, ever the actress, leaned closer to him, whispering loud enough for Emma to hear. "She looks like she came from a thrift store." Then she laughed, tossing her red hair as though mocking a queen in exile. Emma didn't respond. She didn't need to. Her silence was sharper than any insult. She simply crossed the ballroom, her heels clicking against marble, her presence undeniable. And though the whispers rose around her, she kept her chin high, her eyes unflinching. "Emma," Andrew said finally, voice low, taut with irritation. "You shouldn't be here." But Emma only looked at him. Her husband, the father of her child, and for the first time, she felt nothing. No love, no longing, only a hollow finality. She leaned closer, her voice calm but cutting. "I won't be here much longer." And with that, she turned and left. What Andrew didn't know, what the cameras couldn't see, was that Emma had already made her move hours earlier. Before coming to the gala, she had walked into their penthouse with steady steps. On Andrew's desk, beside his leather-bound planner, she had placed a manila folder. Inside were the divorce papers, signed and final. Her handwriting, firm and elegant, sealed the end of their marriage. She didn't leave a note. She didn't need to. The paper spoke louder than any words ever could. Back in the ballroom, Andrew tried to shake off the encounter. He laughed too loudly, held Yila too tightly, poured himself another glass of champagne. But inside, a seed of unease had been planted. For the first time, he felt something slipping out of his control. Meanwhile, Emma's car pulled away from the gala. She looked out at the city lights, her reflection staring back from the tinted window. Her heart raced, her stomach twisted, but her hands didn't tremble. The tears that once came so easily were gone. In their place was fire. She had chosen her moment carefully. Andrew would not discover the papers until he stumbled home in the early hours, drunk on champagne and arrogance. He would open the folder expecting contracts, deals, maybe an invitation. Instead, he would find his world unraveling in ink. The betrayal he thought was his weapon had become his undoing. Emma leaned back in the car seat, whispering to the child within her, "It's over. He doesn't own us anymore." But fate had one more twist waiting. As the car neared the West Side Highway, Emma's phone buzzed with a new message. Her breath caught when she read it. "Mrs. Weston, your jet is ready. Private terminal, gate 4. Everything has been arranged." Emma blinked, stunned. She hadn't told anyone she was leaving. She hadn't told a soul about her decision. So who could have prepared this? Her mind raced. Could it be Ethan Blackwell? The billionaire CEO, Andrew's rival, the man with eyes that always lingered just a moment longer on her, as though he saw the pain no one else noticed? She didn't know for certain, but something told her the message was no accident. Her driver glanced in the rearview mirror. "Ma'am, should I head to the terminal?" Emma hesitated only a moment. Then she nodded. "Yes, take me there." The city blurred past her window as the car sped toward the airport. For the first time in years, Emma felt something she thought she had lost: possibility. The weight of chains was lifting, replaced by the rush of a future unknown but hers to claim. Back at the gala, Andrew was basking in the glow of his mistress's laughter, oblivious to the storm waiting in his penthouse. Yila draped across him like a crown of thorns. He raised a glass as if toasting his own invincibility. But what he didn't realize was that the empire he worshipped, the marriage he had mocked, the life he thought he controlled, was slipping through his fingers like sand. And when the night ended, Andrew would return to find a silent penthouse, a manila folder, and the shocking truth: his pregnant wife had left not just the gala, but his life, boarding a jet that would carry her away from him forever. The car ride to the private terminal felt endless. Outside the tinted windows, Manhattan's neon lights blurred into streaks of gold and crimson, but Emma hardly saw them. Her mind replayed every betrayal, every lonely night, every cruel word Andrew had spoken to her. For the first time, the reality of her choice crashed down on her with brutal force. She was leaving. Leaving not just a man, but a marriage, a home, a life she had built with trembling hope. Her chest tightened, panic clawing at her throat. What was she doing? Where was she going? She had no plan, no certainty, only a message from an unknown sender telling her a jet was waiting. Tears welled in her eyes, hot and uncontrollable. She pressed a hand to her belly, whispering, "I'm so sorry, baby. I don't know what's going to happen." Her voice cracked, trembling as though speaking the words out loud made her failure real. The car pulled into the private terminal. Floodlights illuminated sleek jets lined on the runway, engines humming softly like predators waiting to take flight. The driver stopped, turned to her politely. "We've arrived, ma'am." Emma froze. Her legs felt heavy, her courage crumbling. What if this was a mistake? What if she couldn't survive on her own? She had lived under Andrew's shadow for so long that independence felt like a foreign country, terrifying and unknown. Her phone buzzed again, another message. "Everything will be all right. Step forward. You are not alone." Emma's throat tightened. She wanted to believe it, but doubt screamed louder. She stumbled out of the car, the night air biting against her skin. The terminal was quiet, eerily so, as if the world itself was holding its breath. She walked slowly toward the lit hangar, each step heavier than the last. Her body trembled, not from cold but from fear. She had never felt so vulnerable. Pregnant, abandoned, betrayed, and now on the edge of a decision that would define the rest of her life. The tears came harder, breaking past the walls she had tried to build. She leaned against her suitcase, sobbing silently. She thought of the nursery back in the penthouse, still empty. She thought of the way Andrew once kissed her forehead, a memory so distant it felt like a lie. She thought of her parents back in Pennsylvania, who had raised her to be strong but never imagined she would face a storm like this. "I can't do this," she whispered. "I can't." Her knees buckled. She sank onto a bench outside the hangar, her face buried in her hands. For a moment, the world shrank into a tunnel of despair. She imagined the headlines already swirling. Pregnant wife abandons millionaire husband. The gossip, the judgment, the whispers, she could hear them all in her mind. What if she was making a terrible mistake? What if she couldn't provide for her child? What if Andrew was right, that she was ordinary, weak, replaceable? The fear consumed her until she could barely breathe. She gasped for air, trembling, her tears falling onto the marble floor beneath her shoes. She thought of going back. Just once, she thought of walking into the penthouse, picking up the divorce papers, pretending none of this had happened. Maybe Andrew would forgive her for daring to leave. Maybe he would let her stay, even if only as a shadow in his world. At least then she wouldn't be alone. The thought was poison, but desperation makes poison taste like salvation. She clutched her belly again, whispering through sobs. "I can't give you nothing. I can't give you pain. You deserve a father, a home, something more than this." For a long time, Emma sat in that darkness, drowning in her fears. The weight of the city, the betrayal, the uncertainty pressed down until she thought she would collapse entirely. And then, through the fog of tears, she heard footsteps. Slow, steady, purposeful. Emma lifted her head, her vision blurred. A tall figure approached from the shadows, his outline sharp under the glow of the terminal lights. He wasn't rushing, wasn't hesitant. He walked with calm certainty, as though he had been waiting for this very moment. Her heart skipped. Panic flared. Who was it? Another betrayal? Another cruel twist from fate? The man stopped a few feet away. His voice was low, steady, reassuring. "Emma," he said, "you're not alone anymore." Her breath caught. She knew that voice. It was Ethan Blackwell, the billionaire CEO, Andrew's rival, the man whose quiet glances had always lingered on her just a second too long, the man who had seen her pain when no one else did. Emma froze, her tears still wet on her cheeks. She wanted to stand, to run, to collapse into his arms, but her body wouldn't move. Ethan's gaze was steady, unwavering. He didn't look at her with pity. He didn't look at her with judgment. He looked at her as though she was more than the broken wife of a cheating husband. He looked at her as though she mattered. Emma's lips trembled, 1,000 questions pressing against her tongue, but only one escaped. "Why are you here?" Ethan stepped closer, his voice firm yet gentle. "Because it's time someone stood by you. And if you'll let me, I will." For the first time that night, Emma felt her lungs expand with a breath that didn't taste of fear. For the first time, she felt the faintest glimmer of hope. And as Ethan extended his hand toward her, Emma realized that her collapse might not be the end. It might be the moment just before she rose again. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The terminal lights hummed, the runway glowed like a silver ribbon in the dark, and Emma's breath came in shallow waves. Ethan's hand remained steady, open, waiting, not demanding. That small grace mattered. She took it. His palm was warm, grounding, the kind of touch that said you're safe without saying anything at all. "Was it you?" she asked, voice hoarse. "The messages, the jet." "Yes," he said, "but only if you want to get on it." He glanced toward the hangar where a sleek Gulfstream sat with its stairs lowered. Nearby, two women in navy uniforms waited, one with a medical bag, the other with a clipboard. "That's Dr. Patel. She's an OBGYN. She'll ride with us. Your comfort first, your choice always." Emma's throat tightened. Politeness, not pity. Boundaries, not pressure. She nodded, and he guided her at a slow pace, matching her steps. The wind nipped at her cheeks. She could still taste the salt of her tears. But inside the cabin, the air was warm and soft. No perfume heavy enough to make her sick, no flashing cameras, no marble floors freezing her feet. Just cream leather seats, a quilted blanket, and the quiet hush of privacy. Dr. Patel greeted her gently, took her vitals, and listened to the baby's heartbeat. The sound filled the cabin like a small drum of hope. "Strong," the doctor said with a smile. "And so are you." Emma swallowed, blinking back fresh tears. "Thank you." Ethan stayed by the door, hands in his pockets, giving her space. When the doctor stepped aside, he moved to the opposite seat and sat down slowly. "I owe you honesty," he said. "You're about to learn things that will hurt, but they'll also protect you." She braced herself. "Tell me." He opened a leather folder. Inside were printouts, time-stamped emails, and screenshots with highlighted lines. 3 months ago, he began, "My compliance team flagged transfers from Andrew's accounts to a shell company tied to Yila. That part is ugly but simple. The part that involves you is not." Emma's hands tightened on the blanket. "Me?" Ethan slid a document across the table. 2 forged authorizations using your e-signature. One opened a line of credit in your name. The other granted household CFO access to a charitable account set up under the Bright Horizons umbrella. If anything blew up, the records would make it look like you approved the funds. She stared at the page until the letters blurred. "No, I've never signed anything like this." "I know," Ethan said quietly. "The metadata proves it. The device that executed the signatures was registered to Andrew's chief of staff. We've preserved everything, chain of custody, server logs, the lot." Her breath shook. Anger didn't roar. It burned steady and low, like a pilot light that finally found fuel. "He really planned to make me the scapegoat." "Yes," Ethan said, and he almost pulled it off. He slid over a sealed drive. "This is a copy. The originals are with counsel and a federal contact who owes me a favor." Emma lifted her eyes. "Why are you doing this for me?" He met her gaze. "Because it's the right thing. And because I watched you stand at those galas with more dignity than any of us deserved. I should have intervened sooner." He lowered his voice. "Tonight I'm intervening fully, with your consent." Silence folded around them. Emma felt the baby shift, a small flutter, as if urging her forward. "Where are we going?" "My coastal house," Ethan said. "It's quiet, secure, and has a nursery prepared for a friend who never used it. 2 female security officers and a house manager will be there. We can also fly you to your parents in Pennsylvania if you prefer. This is your decision, not mine." Choice. He kept giving her that word as if he knew how rarely she'd held it. Emma inhaled, then nodded. "Your house, tonight." He signaled to the pilot, then leaned back as the engines purred. The runway lights stretched ahead like a promise. He didn't crowd her, didn't pepper her with plans, just let her settle as Dr. Patel brought water and a small plate of crackers. When Emma's hand stopped trembling, Ethan spoke again, lower, careful. "There's more," he said. "Andrew's board is restless. Liquidity issues, exposure from the charity accounts, and his behavior. I acquired a significant minority position over the last year. I wasn't planning to use it like this. But when I saw those forged documents, I triggered a governance review. By morning, he'll face an emergency session." Emma's heart skittered. "You can take his company?" "I can force accountability," he said. "Whether the board removes him is up to them. Whether the press gets a story tonight is up to you." Her fingers grazed the sealed drive. "You're giving me the choice to go public." "Or to do nothing," Ethan said. "Or to hand everything to your lawyer and sleep. Power is not the headline. It's the right to decide how your story is told." Emma closed her eyes. For the first time, the future opened in more than one direction. She could imagine waking up without dread. She could imagine her child seeing her as brave, not broken. She could imagine being more than a shadow in a man's world. "Why tonight?" she asked. "Because he escalated tonight," Ethan replied. "He showed up at the gala with Yila, then placed a late request through a friendly judge for a temporary order restricting you from traveling out of state under the guise of marital counseling. It didn't go through, the judge declined, but it told me his next move would be darker. I couldn't risk him boxing you in. Emma let out a shaky breath. He would cage me just to keep control. He would, Ethan said. Which is why you're here, leaving. He studied her carefully. Emma, I also need you to know this isn't a bargain. I won't ask for anything you don't want to give. If you decide tomorrow you don't want my help anymore, I'll respect it and still keep you protected. The plane began to taxi. The hum grew deeper, comforting. Emma watched the runway slide past the windows and remembered standing alone at the nursery door, praying for a sign. Maybe this was it. Not rescue, not a fairy tale, just a good man offering a safe road when the one behind her had collapsed. Thank you, she said. The words were small, but they carried everything. Ethan nodded once. Rest. Dr. Patel will check on you during the flight. He reached for the folder again, as if remembering something, then paused. There's one last piece. He turned a page to a photo. Andrew and Hila at a private club, faces close, Hila holding a phone toward a contract on a table. On the contract, Emma's forged signature gleamed under the camera flash. Another leak? Emma asked. A leak we can control, Ethan said. We can time it, or we can bury it. Your call. Emma stared at the evidence, feeling the last ties snap clean. She didn't feel small anymore. She didn't feel helpless. She felt ready. The flight attendant stepped forward to secure the cabin. The pilot's voice came through the intercom, calm and crisp. Cabin secure, cleared for takeoff. Then Ethan's phone vibrated against the table. He glanced down, his jaw set. What is it? Emma asked. He turned the screen so she could see the message from his head of security. Andrew's team just called in a wellness check at your parents' house. Local police en route. Intent, intimidation. We're on it. Emma's pulse jumped. Anger rose, clean and fierce. He won't stop. No, Ethan said, but we will. He tapped a reply, then looked at her. Do you still want to go? She lifted her chin. More than ever. The engines roared, the plane gathered speed, and the runway lights blurred into a bright river. Emma reached for the armrest, and Ethan's hand found hers, steady and sure. The nose lifted, the weight fell away, and the city dropped beneath them like a past she no longer had to carry. Another buzz, another message. Ethan read it, a shadow crossing his face, then met her eyes. They moved faster than I expected, he said. Andrew just filed an emergency claim that you misappropriated marital assets. He's trying to freeze your accounts tonight. Emma exhaled, not with fear this time, but with resolve. Then we'll move faster. The plane climbed into open night, stars scattered like quiet witnesses beyond the glass. Emma pressed a hand to her stomach and whispered, We're safe. Ethan's phone lit once more. He glanced down, then smiled, brief and certain. Your lawyer just got the freeze denied, and the board called the emergency session for 7 a.m. Emma turned to the window, the dark ocean widening beneath them, and felt the first true peace she'd known in months touch the edges of her heart. And then, just as the cabin lights dimmed, a new notification flashed across Emma's screen. A live video from Hila's account, title blazing. Midnight Confession, the Weston's Secret. Watched by thousands and climbing. The jet cut through the night sky, carrying Emma toward a future she could barely imagine. Her collapse had left her fragile, but Ethan's revelations and his unwavering presence planted something deeper than survival. For the first time in months, she wasn't only thinking of escape, she was thinking of becoming someone her husband could never crush again. When the plane landed on the coast, dawn painted the horizon in strokes of orange and violet. Emma stepped onto the tarmac, the salty wind brushing against her face. Ethan's estate loomed nearby, not ostentatious but commanding, a sleek glass and stone home overlooking the Atlantic. Unlike Andrew's penthouse, cold, staged, built to intimidate, this house breathed openness, warmth, and quiet strength. Inside, Emma was shown to a suite prepared just for her. Soft ivory drapes swayed by the balcony doors, and a cradle sat by the window, as though waiting for a story to begin. For a moment, her knees weakened. No one had ever prepared a place for her. Not like this, not with care. She touched the cradle's edge and whispered, "We'll be okay." That morning, she allowed herself to sleep, deep, dreamless, necessary. Hours later, when she awoke, Ethan had already arranged what came next. Waiting in the living room was a team. 2 women stylists, a nutritionist, and a discreet legal advisor. Emma hesitated at first, clutching her robe, her voice shaking. "I don't want to be someone I'm not." Ethan's reply was calm but certain. "You're not changing who you are. You're reclaiming what he tried to bury." The transformation began. Her tangled hair, neglected in weeks of stress, was cut into waves that framed her face with new strength. Her wardrobe, once dictated by Andrew's approval, safe, muted, designed to blend, was replaced with colors that reflected her. Deep blues, emerald greens, silk dresses that celebrated her pregnancy instead of hiding it. The mirror reflected a woman she'd barely recognized, radiant, alive, untouchable. But the true makeover wasn't fabric or cosmetics, it was fire. With every brushstroke, every stitch, Emma remembered pieces of herself she thought were gone. The girl who had dreamed of starting a foundation for children. The woman who once believed she was worthy of love and respect. The mother who vowed to give her child a life free of chains. The legal advisor laid out documents, asset protections, custody petitions, evidence packages ready to dismantle Andrew's claims. "He can't freeze you out anymore," the advisor said. "Not with this." Emma's hands no longer trembled as she signed her name. With every stroke of the pen, she was not just leaving Andrew, she was erasing the story he tried to write for her. By evening, Ethan invited her to the terrace overlooking the sea. The sky blazed crimson as waves crashed below. He poured sparkling water into crystal glasses, raising his in quiet salute. "To your new beginning," he said. Emma lifted hers. Her voice, steady now, carried farther than she expected. To never being his victim again. That night, she stood in front of the mirror one last time. She wore a black satin gown that hugged her figure, her shoulders bare, her eyes fierce. She whispered to her reflection, "He wanted me broken, but I'm going to walk back into his world stronger than he ever imagined." The phone on the dresser buzzed, a news alert. Emma's heart tightened as she read the headline flashing across every screen in New York. Yila Summers live, the Westons' marriage exposed, the truth about Emma. The mistress's smirking face filled the feed, her voice already echoing to millions. Emma tightened her grip on the phone, her eyes no longer fearful but sharp as steel. And as the world tuned in to watch her humiliation, Emma whispered to her unborn child, "They don't know yet, but they're about to." The night of reckoning arrived with a kind of inevitability that Emma could feel in her bones. For weeks, Andrew had strutted across Manhattan like a man untouchable, clinging to his mistress and mocking the woman he thought he had destroyed. But arrogance blinds even the clever, and Andrew was no exception. He had mistaken Emma's silence for weakness. He had mistaken her retreat for defeat. What he didn't know was that she had been gathering her strength, her proof, and her allies. Tonight, under the same chandeliers where he had humiliated her, Emma Weston would return, and this time, she would not be the victim. The Bright Horizons Gala was the crown jewel of the social calendar, the very stage where Andrew believed he reigned supreme. The Met's Great Hall shimmered with gold light and echoing music, the marble staircase lined with paparazzi eager for their next scandal. Guests glided past in gowns and tuxedos worth fortunes, each vying to be seen, to be envied. And then the doors opened. Emma Weston stepped inside, her black satin gown catching the light like liquid fire. The crowd hushed. Whispers rippled. She was not the pale shadow they remembered, the humiliated wife slipping away with tears in her eyes. She was radiant, commanding, her every step echoing with purpose. Her hand rested on her belly, not as a shield but as a crown, proof of life, of resilience, of a future Andrew could never claim. At her side walked Ethan Blackwell. Impeccably tailored, his presence magnetic yet understated, he did not overshadow Emma. He amplified her. Their arrival was no accident. It was strategy. The photographer's flashes erupted, capturing a tableau that would dominate headlines by morning. The abandoned wife returns with a billionaire ally. Andrew's laughter faltered when he saw her. He stood near the champagne fountain, Ela draped in crimson silk at his arm, smug as ever. But the color drained from his face as the room's attention shifted away from him, pulled like gravity toward Emma. For the first time, Andrew Weston looked small. Emma didn't rush. She let the silence stretch, let the eyes burn into her, let Andrew stew in the humiliation he had once so easily inflicted on her. When she finally spoke, her voice carried across the hall. "Andrew." The name was sharp, final. The music dimmed, conversations froze. All eyes turned. "You once told this room I would beg to come back," she said. "You told them I was nothing without you. Tonight, I want them to see the truth." Gasps spread like fire. Hila shifted uncomfortably, her hand tightening on Andrew's arm. "Don't listen to her," Hila hissed, her smile brittle. "She's desperate." But Emma only smiled, a quiet, devastating smile. Desperate women don't bring evidence. Ethan handed her a sleek folder. She opened it slowly, theatrically, revealing copies of the forged documents, the financial transfers, the schemes Andrew had plotted with Hila. The crowd murmured, voices overlapping in shock. Emma raised her eyes. "These are his betrayals, not just to me, but to this charity, to his investors, to all of you who trusted him." Andrew's mask cracked. "This is nonsense," he barked, his face flushed. "She's lying. She's—" "Am I?" Emma interrupted, her tone ice. "Because the federal investigator I spoke to this afternoon didn't think so." She gestured to the side, and there, stepping forward from the shadows, was a man in a dark suit, an agent who nodded once to confirm her words. The hall erupted. Whispers turned into shouts, cameras flashed wildly, investors exchanged horrified looks. Andrew stammered, reaching for Hila, but she pulled away, her survival instincts kicking in. "Andrew," Emma said softly so only he could hear. "You built an empire on arrogance. Tonight I'm tearing it down with the truth." Security moved in. Andrew tried to push past them, but the agent placed a firm hand on his shoulder. Hila shrank back, her crimson gown now a mark of shame rather than a lure. Emma stepped closer, her voice calm but carrying across the hall. "This isn't revenge. This is justice. And it's long overdue." Andrew shouted her name, his voice breaking, but it no longer mattered. The cameras had already captured his fall. The guests had already chosen their side, and Emma, once invisible, once humiliated, stood in the center of it all, radiant and unbroken. Ethan placed a hand gently at her back, not leading her but standing with her. Together they walked past Andrew, past Hila, past the ruin of a man who had believed she would crawl. Each step was liberation, each breath proof that she had risen. The music started again, tentative at first, then stronger, as though the orchestra itself recognized the shift. The gala had become Emma's stage, and as she left the hall, the final flashes of cameras chasing her like a queen crowned in survival, Emma whispered to herself, "This isn't the end. This is the beginning of my reign." The morning after the gala, Manhattan woke to headlines that shook its gilded towers. Andrew Weston, Wall Street's golden boy, was finished. His smiling face was splashed across every newspaper, but this time it wasn't triumph they captured. It was disgrace. Fraud allegations, mistress betrayal, federal investigation. The empire he built on arrogance crumbled in a single night, and at the center of every story was Emma. No longer the humiliated wife hiding in the shadows, she was the woman who had stood her ground, exposed the truth, and walked away stronger. For once, the spotlight didn't burn her, it crowned her. Inside Ethan's coastal estate, the morning was quiet. Sunlight poured through glass walls, warming the hardwood floors. Emma sat on the terrace wrapped in a shawl, her hands resting gently over her belly. For the first time in months, she wasn't trembling. For the first time, she felt safe. The baby kicked, a soft flutter that drew a smile to her lips. "We did it," she whispered. "We're free." Behind her, Ethan stepped out with 2 mugs of tea. He placed one before her, then leaned against the railing, his eyes on the horizon. He didn't rush her with questions, didn't demand gratitude. He simply existed beside her, steady as the tide. Emma studied him quietly. There had always been something about Ethan, something beyond the wealth and the power. It was the way he looked at her, not as an ornament or a liability, but as a person who mattered. She had seen that in his eyes long before she'd admitted it to herself. "Why me?" she asked finally, her voice soft. "Out of everyone in that room, why did you choose to help me?" Ethan turned to her, his gaze unwavering. "Because you remind me that power doesn't have to be cruel, and because I've watched you endure more than anyone should. Emma, I didn't just want to protect you, I wanted to stand beside you." Her throat tightened, tears threatening. But these weren't the tears of humiliation she had cried for Andrew. These were tears of release, of healing, of finally being seen. Days turned into weeks. The investigation into Andrew deepened, his accounts frozen, his mistress vanishing as quickly as she had appeared. He tried calling Emma, pleading, threatening, bargaining. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. The man who once controlled every part of her life had no power over her anymore. Instead, Emma focused on building something new. With Ethan's guidance, but more importantly, with her own vision, she began drafting plans for a foundation. A place that would provide resources for women left broken by betrayal, for mothers who had nowhere to turn, for those who needed what she had once prayed for, a second chance. When she walked into her first board meeting, her gown replaced with a simple navy dress, and her hair pulled back with purpose, the room quieted. No longer was she Andrew's wife. She was Emma Weston, founder, mother, survivor. She didn't just have a story, she had a mission. Ethan attended that meeting, not as a savior, but as support. He sat quietly, letting Emma's words fill the room. And when she finished her presentation, when the board erupted into applause, Ethan's eyes held pride, not for what he had done for her, but for what she had become. Months later, the foundation's gala was announced, not in Andrew's world of arrogance, but in Emma's world of healing. The same chandeliers that had once witnessed her humiliation now shimmered above her triumph. Guests gathered, not to gossip, but to celebrate resilience. Emma stood at the podium, her child asleep in a cradle nearby, her voice steady as she addressed the crowd. For too long, I believed my worth was tied to someone else's opinion. I believed silence was strength and endurance was love. But tonight, I stand here to tell you, strength is walking away from what destroys you. Love is protecting yourself and those who depend on you. And worth is something no one can take unless you give it away. The applause thundered. Tears glistened in strangers' eyes. Emma felt her own heart expand, not with pride, but with peace. As the night wound down, she found herself on the terrace again, the city lights glowing like fireflies. Ethan joined her, as he always did, not filling the silence but honoring it. He looked at her with quiet respect, with something more lingering behind it. Emma, he said finally, his voice low, you don't need anyone to complete you. You've proven that. But if you ever decide you want a partner, not out of need but out of choice, I'd be honored if you chose me. Emma's heart swelled. For years, she had begged for scraps of love from a man who gave none. Now she was being offered something she had never known. Love without chains. She didn't answer immediately. She didn't need to. She simply placed her hand over his, steady and sure. For now, that was enough. As midnight fell, Emma whispered to her child, we're safe, we're loved, and we'll never be broken again. And for the first time in her life, she truly believed it. Because in the end, Andrew lost everything. Ela faded into obscurity, and Emma Weston rose not just from betrayal, but into a life brighter, freer, and more powerful than she had ever imagined. All right, my friend, so the story has come to an end. And if you're still here with me right now, it means something in Emma's journey touched you in a very personal way. Maybe it reminded you of a time you felt unseen. Maybe it made you think of someone you know who stayed silent when they deserved to roar. Or maybe it showed you that even in the deepest betrayal, healing is possible. What Emma went through wasn't just about heartbreak. It was about finding her strength again, standing up and saying, I am not defined by someone else's cruelty. This is where the lesson speaks to us. The Stoic philosophers used to remind us that we don't control what others do, but we do control how we respond. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. And that's exactly what Emma did. She couldn't stop Andrew from betraying her. But she could choose how to respond. And by choosing dignity, truth, and self-worth, she didn't just survive, she transformed. Life will always throw storms our way. Betrayal, loss, disappointment. But as Seneca said, difficulties strengthen the mind as labor does the body. Emma's collapse was not her end, it was her beginning. And maybe that's a reminder for you too. Your pain today can be the seed of your power tomorrow. So my wonderful friends, if this story reached your heart in some way, don't just carry it quietly. Share it. Pass it to someone who might need this reminder that they are stronger than they think. And if you'd like to keep walking with us through stories that heal, inspire, and stir the soul, then make sure you hit that like button, share this video, and subscribe to the channel. Because who knows? The next story might just be the one that changes your life.